Hello, everyone, and welcome to Soul Standing. My name is Beth, and this position is the best way for you to not see the mess of me completely repainting a bunch of my house. But I wanted to come to you and talk to you because it is the end of January, and in January, the Children's Literature Book Club Classic, blah, 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 blah. In January, the Classic Children's Literature Book Club book pick was Peter Pan. And so I'm here to talk to you about J.M. Barrie. James Matthew was the author of Peter Pan, and he was an interesting character. So I'm going to do my very best not to go off on a tangent about Peter Pan. I will leave that for a different video. But let me just kind of go over a few things with you. James Matthew Barrie's father was a weaver. He was apparently a very talented weaver. His mother had taken over household duties in her own house growing up by the time she was 8, and she just continued along that vein and was a stay-at-home wife and mother taking care of the children in the late 1800s in Scotland. Now, James was the ninth of 10 children, two of whom passed away before he was born, so there were 8 in the house. When he was 6 years old, his older brother David, who was very obviously their mother's favorite, passed away from an ice skating incident the day before his 14th birthday. Seeing how devastated his mother was and wanting to help her, as well as wanting to garner some of that attention and affection, James started wearing some of his brother David's clothing and trying to whistle and walk in the ways that David did. He would come into the room where his mother was, and his mother would, for a second, be like, "Is that you?" And in one of his correspondences, one of the things he wrote, he said, "For a moment, I thought that she was talking to the dead boy, and I just said, 'No, Mommy, it's just me.'" But his mother often would say things about how she was glad to know that David at least would never have to know the pain of growing up, that he would always get to be a young boy. And this is at least partially where the idea of a boy who never grew up started when James Matthew was 6 years old. Now, when he was 8, he went with some of his elder siblings to go to school away from home. He came home when he was 10 and kind of went back and forth to different boarding schools and local schools, just kind of depending on how things were going in the family at the time. Through all of that, he became a very voracious reader, and he was always known as a good storyteller. So when he grew up a little bit more, he moved to London. He was an actor and a playwright. And in 1902, he published his first novel called Little White Bird, which was an adult novel. I have read it. It's very odd. Most people, I don't think, would enjoy it at this particular point in time. However, this is the first time we see Peter Pan. Peter Pan lives in Kensington Park. So Little White Bird is the first appearance of Peter Pan in a published work. And then they extracted those chapters from Little White Bird and reprinted them as Peter Pan in Kensington Park. He also then in 1904 wrote and published the stage play Peter Pan or the Boy Who Would Never Grow Up, which morphed into Peter and Wendy. Throughout all of this, he created fast friendships with several amazing authors of the time. He played on a cricket team with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and I believe he lived next door to H.G. Wells. I know he was friends, and I think H.G. also played on the cricket team. A.A. Milne played on the cricket team. Rudyard Kipling was on this cricket team. They were all great friends. Just absolutely boggles my mind. Now, James Matthew Barrie did get married to an actress, and eventually that fell apart. And there is a lot of speculation as to whether or not they were actually physical. I about said physically married. Like they were legally married and they were friends, but like were they married. And I think the only people that would know are kind of past telling us at this point. However, they were married in 1894. Her name is Mary. Mary had become friends with James because he had her act in a play that he wrote. And then he became very ill, and she helped take care of him. They got married in 1894. But in the early 1900s, she started having an affair. Now, this marriage between she and James was reportedly unconsummated. And she started having an affair with someone else about a decade or so after the wedding. And, they ended up um, legally separating. And then she refused to call off her affair. So he ended up filing for divorce in 1909. Um, and then he continued to support Mary financially, giving her an annual allowance even after she married the man whom she'd been having the affair with. They still celebrated their wedding anniversary, and he would give her her annual allowance at that dinner, which is both sweet and very, very sad. So, most people know of J.M. Barrie's entanglement, would be a good word for it, with the Llewellyn Davies, good grief, family. Basically, he had a St. Bernard named Porthos. He would walk the dog through the park, and he met the older three boys, George, Jack, and Peter, in the park one day, and he entertained them. They would often meet up. He actually created Peter Pan to entertain George and Jack, and that was kind of the name Peter came from the third boy, Peter, because he was a small child, and so he would make up stories about how this infant who could do like nothing was actually able to fly and do things. And then he said that babies were birds before they were born. Parents put bars on nursery windows to keep the little ones from flying away. And that grew into a tale of a baby boy who actually did fly away, living in Kensington Gardens, which is where that whole section from Little White Bird that was published in 1902, that's where that came from. And then they pulled that out for the play in 1904. In 1907, Arthur Davies died, and Uncle Jim became even more involved with the Davies family, actually giving them financial support. Um, he actually used his income from like Peter Pan and many other things that he was publishing in order to pay for their living arrangements, their food, and their education, as well as giving the annual income to his ex-wife and taking care of himself. So obviously he was doing very well for himself and for the other people. Sylvia, the mother, passed away in 1910. Barrie claimed that they had recently become engaged, and her will didn't say anything about that at all, but it did specify that she wanted JMB to be trustee and guardian to the boys, along with her mother Emma, her brother Guy de Maurier, and Arthur's brother Compton. It expressed her confidence in Barrie as the boys' caretaker and her wish for the boys to treat him and their uncles with absolute confidence and straightforwardness, to talk to them about everything. When copying the will for Sylvia's family informally a few months later, Barrie inserted himself. It said that Sylvia had written she would like Mary Hodgson, the boy's nurse, to continue taking care of them, for Jenny, which was Hodgson's sister, to come and help her. But instead, Barrie wrote Jimmy, which was her nickname for him. He didn't really get along well with Hodgson, but he was able to serve as a surrogate parent with her fairly well until the boys were all grown. There is some unsubstantiated speculation that Barrie was a little too interested in friendships with children. Mostly this comes from Little White Bird in which the protagonist helps a small boy undress for bed, and that boy requests that they sleep in the same bed. However, there's absolutely zero evidence from anyone, including the children that he helped to raise, that shows that he was one. Um, I would like to point out that A, small children like for you to sleep in the bed with them. My 3-year-old does it all the time. And B, they have difficulties undressing and getting dressed for bed. And the terminology of that time period would have said, like, I was helping him get undressed for bed, as if we were changing into night clothes and things like that. So, there is even denial from the Davies children in articles and things as they got older, especially the youngest one, Nico. Um, he stated that Uncle Jim was an innocent, which is why he could even write Peter Pan. And their relationship went on forever. Um, so the Peter Pan statue in Kensington Gardens comes from that book and was supposed to be modeled upon old photographs of Michael Davies dressed as the character. Um, and Barrie was super disappointed in the results because the sculptor actually did not use Michael, did not use the old photographs, and Barrie was really upset because he said that this does not show the devil in Peter. And that was one of the things he was really showing, was that this child um, is a terrible villain. And we will get into more of that later on. He got he got the children through their teen years, and then uh, the two he was actually closest to, George was killed in action in 1915 during the First World War, and Michael, with whom Barrie corresponded daily, drowned in 1921 with his friend Rupert Buxton at a known danger spot at the Sandford Loch near Oxford, 1 month shy of his 21st birthday. Um, and then after Barrie passed away, Peter compiled family letters and papers, and with his own, like, he put informed comments and things of his family and their relationships with Barrie, called it his morgue. And then Peter died in 1960 by throwing himself in front of a train at the Sloane Square station. However, it was 23 years prior to that when Barrie himself died of pneumonia on June 19th, 1937. He is buried in Caremere next to his parents and two of his siblings. And there is a museum maintained by the National Trust for Scotland at 9 Brecon Road in Marylebone. 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 I'm not even 100% sure. Yeah. So the Llewellyn Davies boys received legacies. He made provisions for Mary to receive an annuity during her lifetime, and the bulk of his estate went to Lady Cynthia Asquith, except for the Peter Pan works. So Little White Bird, Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens, Peter Pan or the Boy Who Would Not Grow Up, and the novel Peter and Wendy, which was the novelized version of the play. All of those, ouch, went to the Great Ormond Street Hospital. So that is the discussion on J.M. Barrie. I tried to condense it, but it's still 15 minutes long. I'm sorry about that, guys. I stuttered and stalked my way through it. If you stuck through the whole thing, I super appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will talk to you again very, very soon. Until next time, I hope you stay safe. And I hope you go and read something good. Bye.